to the Awakened Kings study. My name is Veronica. In this video, we will be continuing our study and transitioning to 2 Kings chapters 1 and 2. Although 1st and 2nd Kings are two books in our Bibles, they were originally written as one book. So the story will continue along as though it did not stop between the two books. So, picking up where we left off, King Ahab has died, and his son Ahaziah has taken the throne. It seems Ahaziah cannot catch a break because, as well as a vassal nation rebelling against them, he also has fallen from the second story of his palace, and he is very injured. He wants to know what will happen, and so he decides he's going to ask a god. Now here's where he goes wrong. Instead of asking the real God what will happen to him, he decides he will send messengers to go to Baal-zebub. And so Elijah meets them along the road, and he comes and he says, I have a message for you from the Lord, the real God. And he says, is it because there is no God in Israel that you are going to inquire of Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron? Now, therefore, thus says the Lord, you shall not come up from the bed where you have gone up, but surely you will die. Then the messengers have to turn around, and this should have been a 60-mile journey, so they're returning early to the king with terrible news. And so the king asked them, who was it that gave you this terrible news? And they try to describe Elijah, and it says that all they needed to tell the king for him to know who it was they said it was a hairy man. That was all the king needed to know, and he knew it was Elijah. And the king was angry. So he sent out a captain and 50 soldiers to go capture Elijah. And they find him, he is sitting on the top of a hill. And the captain says, man of God, the king says you have to come with us. And Elijah responds and says, well, if I'm really a man of God, and then he calls down fire from heaven to consume the captain and the soldiers. And so the king hears about the soldiers, and so he sends a second group of 50 soldiers with their captain. And the captain comes, and the same thing happens. So then the king sends a third group of 50 soldiers and a captain. This time, the captain bows down before Elijah, and he begs him for mercy. He acknowledges the power that Elijah has from the real God. The Lord interrupts and says, you may go with him. You don't need to be afraid of him. He will not turn and hurt you. And so Elijah then spares this captain and the soldiers and goes with them to the king to deliver his terrible news. And so the king dies, and we read that he has no sons, and so his brother Jehoram takes the throne. And now this is a different Jehoram from the Jehoram who is reigning at this very exact time in the southern kingdom of Judah. And now our story picks back up with Elijah, and Elijah has been reunited with his friend and fellow prophet Elisha. And Elisha has been chosen as the one who will succeed Elijah after Elijah's time as God's prophet comes to an end. And so in this passage, we get to see something that doesn't happen very often in the Bible. It is so rare, it only happens 3 times. Elijah is taken to heaven in a whirlwind without dying. And so we see other places in the Bible this happens to Jesus, this happens to Elijah, and it also happens to someone named Enoch, who we don't know very much about because he's only mentioned briefly in a genealogy in Genesis 5. And so Elijah knows he is to be taken up to heaven, or at least that his time is nearing an end. Elijah turns and he asks Elisha, is there anything I can do for you before I depart? And Elisha is so bold as to ask, Elijah, would you give me a double portion of your spirit? And so it says, as they were going along and talking, behold, there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire, which separated the two of them. And Elijah went up by a whirlwind to heaven. Elisha saw it and cried out, my father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen. And he saw Elijah no more. And after this, it says that Elisha bowed down and he tore his clothes because he had seen this, even just this one snippet of God's power and glory. And he also was mourning that his friend and mentor had been taken from him. And so after he mourns for Elijah, he gets up and he takes the mantle and he returns to the Jordan River and he tests to see, have I truly gotten this power? And true enough, the Jordan River parted in front of him and he crossed on dry land. So then he continues along his way towards Bethel, and along the road come some rather shady characters, and many, many, many of them. We read that a gang of young men comes up to him, and they start threatening him and mocking him. And they say things like, go up, you bald head. And this seems that they are making fun of his report to have seen Elijah go up to heaven in a whirlwind. Elisha, he actually curses them. And in response, 2 bears come running out of the wilderness and they ate 42 of the young men. Despite the evil around, God is still working in these stories.